Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of Indie Book Review. I'm Quinn Buckland and I am here to talk about Welcome to Rocky Tank Town by Ali Hamdoun. Pretty sure that's how you pronounce that. Might be wrong. I don't know. This book is described as a coming-of-age period piece drama, and to be perfectly honest, I can't disagree with that more. I don't really see much of a coming-of-age aspect of it, or period piece in any way. Like bits and pieces of it take place in the 60s, but that's about as far as that goes. Yeah, I really just wouldn't call this a period piece, or a coming-of-age story, despite the sake that it does have the main character as a kid in the period time when it's in the 60s. But that's as far as that goes. Like, it doesn't have anything else to do with it. So, what's this book about? Well, it's about this guy Marshall who goes back to Rocky Tank Town for Thanksgiving with his mom. And him reliving his childhood bit by bit and getting back into contact with his old friend and there's several flashbacks that show their friendship and just some of the things that they did. To be perfectly honest, this book really doesn't have a lot that happens in it. Like, it's not a very big book. It's pretty tiny, but almost nothing really happens. Especially like for the first half of it, it's kind of just really dull. Like, it's quite literally just Marshall going about this old town, and the few things that they did as a kid, that he did with his best friend May Sissy as a kid. There's really not much to this first half. Like, it was really dull, and I almost put the book down. But I kept going, because, like I said, it's a really tiny book. I might as well just finish it. Once it hits about that halfway mark, holy shit does it actually start getting interesting. Like, the book just does a complete and total 180, and Okay, so there's this big problem throughout this book. It is so over-described. Like, there's some serious over-describing going on. Like, I'm not going to read from it to give examples or anything like that, because that's just not how I do things. But there's some serious over-description going on. Like, it talks, like, there's several paragraphs that go about this person's room, right down to the dimensions of this desk, how many drawers are in it. I think the make of, like, the actual wood that goes into it. Like, it's just way too much. It described every poster. And it kind of continued throughout the book like that. And after a while, I found myself having to stop myself from skipping bits and pieces, so I didn't accidentally miss something when I was trying to get through all this needless description. Which is kind of a shame, because this guy's knack for describing things is one of the best that I've seen. Which takes me to this whole, when the book does a complete and total 180 and becomes one of the most fascinating things that I've read probably all winter. I'm probably going to get into a little bit of spoilery territory here. And it can't be helped. To give this book the proper praise that it needs to go into a bit of a spoilery territory. So the point where the book really gets interesting is May Sissy's aunt's funeral. She was 49, and the description that goes into everything that went on with this funeral, including, in fact, especially because of the massive religious ceremonies that he describes throughout this bit, you definitely get this sense of foreboding, this sense that something is going terribly wrong. You know, this is the first time you've seen May Sissy as a kid, not in her usual chipper self. And then you see why. It goes into her relationship with her mother and her mother's mass religious fanaticism. And actually, Missy even picks up Carrie as a form of parallel, which I actually kind of appreciated. There's been several instances of pop culture references throughout the book, but this is the first one where I'm like, okay, yeah, that one's actually really good. That one's kind of clever. I mean, obvious, but clever at the same time. And then we get to the ending. Well, what there is of an ending, anyway. There's this family that came from there. Well, the husband came from there. He brought his wife and daughter there because there was some court case going on. Well, Miss Sissy has a bit of a history with this person, and not a very good one. And before anybody thinks it's nothing like that. It's not sexual in any shape or form. Definitely very bloody, but nothing like what you're thinking. I'm actually not going to spoil that one, in case somebody does want to read this book. But Miss Sissy gets her vengeance, and the level of description that went into that scene was just perfect. I'm not a fan of horror because I find it boring and predictable. I'm not a fan of psychological thrillers because I find them boring and predictable. This one, as soon as the chapter started, I knew where it was going, but it was not boring. This little book has probably one of the best horror thriller chapters that I have ever read, and that is saying something. When Paulina's tied to that chair, like, you know where it's going. Like, there's no other place that it can be going. You know where it's going, but you don't want it to go there. And then the book just kind of ends. Like, nothing. Like, there's no actual real conclusion to it. Like, there's a bunch of poetry in it, which probably gives a bit of a hint as to what happens or what goes on, but to be perfectly honest, I'm not a poetry person. I don't read into things very well when it comes to poetry. I never have. I never have been that kind of person who can. Like, even through school, when we did poetry, I always had to have somebody explain the poetry to me because I just didn't get it. I'm of the mind that metaphors are bullshit. I hate them. Genuinely do not like metaphors. I mean, I'm sure the poetry in this book is great. I wouldn't know. I don't get it. I don't get poetry. And there's a lot of poems in this book. Like, there's actually a point where it stops the story and goes into a bit of a poetic interlude. And then you get that massive May Sissy moment, and then more poetry, and then you get kind of a little bit left from Marshall, and then the ending is more poetry. It's like, well, okay. I don't get this. I really don't. So, I hope this does something. I hope this means something. But anyway, despite all that, those few scenes, like that just small section of book, almost really makes up for it. Like, it really got me invested in what was going on. And to be perfectly honest, if this guy did a horror or thriller book with his level of detail and just his natural sense of dramatic timing, I would read the hell out of that. Like, try and stop me. The way this guy describes things, oh man. Like I said, that was the best horror thriller scene that I've read in so long. Just due to the level of description that's in it. But at the same time, it wasn't over-described. So yeah, if this guy did a horror thriller, I would read that. All in all, I can't give this book a particularly high score. Like I said, that first half was just boring as hell. I'm disregarding the poetry bits because, like I said, I don't get poetry, so I can't score it high or low. So I'm just going on the story as a whole, based on what I got. And unfortunately, I can't give this any higher than a 5 out of 10. Like, it's very middle of the road. It would have been much lower, but those few scenes that I absolutely loved really saved it. I might be in the minority with this. I don't know for sure. This book doesn't really actually have any reviews up, so sad to say I'm probably the first one to really do this book. And I'd actually like to see what other people think of it. Like, am I in the majority? I kind of hope I am. I really do. I want this author to actually really go farther in his career. I want him to really pump out books. Because he's got a talent. He has a lot of potential to do something absolutely incredible. And it doesn't have to be horror thriller. He could do something completely different. But there needs to be a bit more of a storyline and maybe less poetry throughout. I don't know. That's just me. But anyway, that's all I got for you folks. I hope you pick out this book. Because like I said, I really would like to see what other people think of this. And as always, I'll see you later.